We often hear about being ready for wisdom, but what does that actually mean? Today, we're going to dive into a pretty wild story that connects history, philosophy, and even a really weird way to learn a new language. And it all boils down to one single powerful idea: letting go. All right, so here's a question for you. What in the world do Australian pensions, a Chinese emperor, and learning English all have in common? I know, it sounds like the start of a really bad joke, right? But believe me, the answer unpacks this incredible lesson about letting go. And you're going to want to stick around because the connection is, well, it's definitely not what you're thinking. So the story that sparks all this kicks off with a conversation. You've got a student and a teacher. The student asks a pretty normal question, and the teacher just shoots back, "I'm not your mother or your father." Whoa, right? It's so abrupt, almost cold. And right away, you know, this is not your average classroom. And believe it or not, it gets even more intense. The student says they don't know something, and the teacher just lays into them, calling them an arbai wu. Now, for those who don't know, that's some pretty harsh Chinese slang. It basically means you're a fool, an idiot. I mean, what kind of teacher says that? It's shocking, for sure. But here's the thing. There's a real method to this madness. Okay, so where does all this start to make sense? Well, you'd never guess. It actually begins with a debate about retirement benefits in Australia, of all places. So check this out. In Australia, the government pension is means tested. What that means is to get the full payout, we're talking rent, utilities, the whole shebang, you basically have to have zero assets. You have to prove you have nothing. And this has created this really bizarre strategy. You've got people who literally spend all their money right before retiring. They sell the house, they go on a huge trip around the world, and then they come back with their pockets completely empty. It's just a wild modern-day example of how attached we are to our stuff and the crazy hoops we'll jump through. Now, this whole pension puzzle connects to something much, much bigger. A really powerful story from history. We're going to go from people who let go of their life savings to a guy who let go of an entire empire. Let me introduce you to the Shunji Emperor. He was the very first emperor of China's Qing dynasty. And this guy fought for 18 long years to build his empire and lock down his power. He was at the absolute peak of his reign, and then he did something nobody could believe. He just walked away, threw it all away to become a Buddhist monk. The big question is, why? Why would anyone do that? Thankfully, he left behind a poem that gives us a clue. In it, he writes about coming in confusion, leaving in a daze, a wasted trip in the human world. You can just feel the disillusionment in those words, can't you? For him, this whole game of life and power was just pointless. A wasted trip that starts and ends in a complete fog. I mean, the sheer force of this decision is just staggering. Think about it. This isn't just quitting your job. This is total, absolute renunciation. He says he's letting his hands go, not just of the throne, but of any care for the future of the dynasty he spent his life building. He basically said, to hell with your dynasty for 10,000 generations. He chose a spiritual journey over a legacy that would last forever. But here's where it gets really interesting. According to that blunt teacher from our opening story, the emperor's act had this totally unexpected side effect. He brings up this concept called Qi Yun. Think of it like cosmic fortune or karmic destiny. The teacher's theory is that by letting go of everything, the emperor created this massive field of good Qi Yun, and this powerful karmic energy ended up protecting his son, who became the famous Kingxi emperor. So get this, in the ultimate paradox, by abandoning his dynasty, he actually saved it. Okay, so we've got people letting go of their money, an emperor letting go of his entire kingdom. What does any of this have to do with learning English? Well, it all comes back to letting go of the old ways you were taught to learn. That teacher we met, he argues that the way most of us learn a language, what he calls bookish learning, is a total trap. You know the drill. You focus so hard on grammar rules and memorizing words that when you actually try to speak, you sound like you're reading a textbook out loud. It's stiff, it's unnatural. He says the answer is authentic learning. And the key? You have to let go of that obsession with rules. Instead, you just mimic the sound, the rhythm, the flow of the language, like listening to a podcast. So here's how his method works. Step 1. Forget the foreign words for a minute. Just get crystal clear on the idea you want to communicate in your own native language. Step 2. Now you just mimic the sound of the other language. You're not worrying about grammar, you're just copying its melody and rhythm. You already know the meaning, right? So you're just learning the music. And finally, step 3, you put it all together. You start talking about deep stuff you already understand, like philosophy, using this new natural way of speaking. See, you're not just studying a language, you're actually embodying it. And this is where it all comes together. The pensions, the emperor, the English lessons, they've all been leading us to one central truth. It all boils down to that famous saying, I'm sure you've heard it. When the student is ready, the teacher will appear. This is really the heart of the whole thing. But what does being ready actually mean? It doesn't matter if you're looking for a financial advisor, a language coach, or a spiritual guide. The right help, the right teacher, they only show up when you've done the work to be able to actually hear what they have to say. Our teacher has a beautiful way of explaining this using a Buddhist idea, Shun Gun Cheng Shu, which translates to good roots maturing. Think of it like this. You have to do the inner work first. You have to prepare the soil of your own mind. Only when that soil is rich and fertile, only when your good roots are mature, can the seed of wisdom that a teacher gives you actually take hold and grow. But it's not that simple. Even when that teacher finally shows up and you start making real progress, the journey is far from over. In fact, the teacher gives one last, absolutely crucial warning. He talks about this classic Zen metaphor called the 10 bowls, which is like a map of the path to enlightenment. And on that map, there's a really dangerous spot. It's the point where you finally feel like you've tamed the bull, that's your chaotic mind, and you get this huge rush of accomplishment. And that is the trap. The trap is thinking, I've made it, I'm done. Your ego swoops in, claims victory, and you mistake one step on the journey for the final destination. True readiness means you have to let go of that feeling of success too. So, all of this leaves us with one final, big question to think about. The Shunji Emperor, he had to let go of a literal empire. Those Australian retirees, in their own way, have to let go of a financial one. So the question for you, for all of us, is this. What's the empire that we're clinging to? Is it some belief we've held forever? A comfortable habit we can't shake? Or maybe a goal that we think defines who we are? What is the one thing we might need to let go of to finally become ready for our own teacher to appear?